The moment my mother placed 2 crumpled dollar bills on the kitchen counter, my childhood quietly ended. I didn't understand it then. There was no dramatic music, no warning sign, no single thought that said, "This is it." Just a soft, careless sound, the scrape of paper against cheap laminate, and the feeling that something had shifted in the room. Something fragile had cracked. I was 11 years old, still small enough that my feet didn't quite touch the floor when I sat at the kitchen table, still young enough to believe that adults, especially parents, had plans, that they knew what they were doing, that they wouldn't leave their children alone in the world. She told me she'd be back in a few weeks, said it casually, like she was going to the store or stepping out for coffee. She smiled while she said it. Not a guilty smile, not a sad one, just a distracted, excited smile, like her mind was already somewhere else. She grabbed her suitcase, checked her phone, and walked out the door. I stood there frozen, clutching those $2 bills so tightly they went damp in my hand, watching her taxi pull away until it disappeared around the corner. That was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be alone. I'm 26 now, telling this story from a distance of 15 years, but time hasn't softened it. I can still remember every detail of that morning with painful clarity. The smell of burnt coffee, the hum of the fridge, the way sunlight fell across the counter where the money lay like a joke. Memory doesn't fade when it's tied to survival. It stays sharp. It stays close. My mother had been a single parent my entire life, though calling her a parent often felt like stretching the truth. She was physically there most days, but emotionally she was always chasing something else. Better men, better trips, better versions of herself that never seemed to arrive. She believed happiness was always one bold decision away, and that anything, or anyone, that slowed her down was negotiable. She worked just enough to scrape by, hopping from job to job, paycheck to paycheck. Money came and went like it was allergic to staying. We lived in a small apartment on the edge of town, with thin walls that carried our neighbors' arguments through the night. Rent was always late, utilities were always a threat. I learned early not to ask for things, not to need things. Needing things made you inconvenient. Needing things made you a problem. The summer I turned 11, she started dating a man who talked about Europe like it was a personality trait. Paris, Rome, Greece. He spoke about wine and art and freedom, about how life was meant to be lived, not survived. Around him, my mother transformed. She laughed more, she dressed better, she glowed in a way I had never seen, like she was finally becoming the person she thought she deserved to be. At first, I didn't think much of it. Adults dated, adults traveled, that was normal. What wasn't normal, but what I didn't understand until it was too late, was that she never talked about me in her plans. When she told me she was going on a trip with him, my first assumption was that arrangements had been made, that someone would be staying with me, that there was a plan, because that's what parents do. They plan, they protect, they don't leave children behind without safety nets. I didn't realize how wrong I was until the morning she left. I woke up to the sound of her suitcase zippers slicing through the quiet apartment. The sound felt sharp, urgent, wrong. I walked into the kitchen in my pajamas, hair messy, eyes heavy with sleep. She was already dressed. Nice clothes, makeup done, phone in her hand, scrolling like it was any other day, like I was standing there, barefoot and confused. When I asked where she was going, she looked startled, almost annoyed, like I'd interrupted her excitement. She talked about Europe the way someone talks about a vacation slideshow, light, animated, distant. Not once did she speak like a mother explaining something to her child. When I finally asked who I'd be staying with, she hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough. "You'll stay here. It's only a month. You'll be fine." Something cold settled in my stomach. I remember asking if she was serious, asking if she understood I was 11 years old. I remember my voice shaking, even then. She brushed it off, said I knew how to use the microwave, said there was food in the freezer, said I was smart, responsible, mature for my age. Words that sounded like compliments, but felt like excuses. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills, and placed them on the counter like they solved everything. When I questioned it, she snapped, told me the trip was expensive, told me I was being dramatic, told me I'd survived worse. She kissed my forehead, quick and dismissive, and walked out the door. The silence she left behind was unbearable. The apartment felt wrong immediately, like it no longer belonged to me, like I was trespassing in my own life. I checked the fridge without really realizing why, counting meals without realizing I was doing math for survival. I rationed everything. 1 small meal a day, half portions, water to trick my stomach into feeling full. Hunger became a constant presence, a dull ache that followed me from room to room. I spent the $2 on bread and peanut butter, carefully counting coins at the register while the cashier watched me with a confused expression. I pretended not to notice. Pride disappears quickly when hunger moves in. By the second week, the food was gone. I skipped meals entirely. I went to bed early so I didn't have to feel it. At night, my stomach growled so loudly it felt like it might wake the neighbors. One evening, desperate, I searched every cabinet and drawer again and found a single can of soup hidden at the back, months past its expiration date. I ate it cold, straight from the can. Metallic, bitter, but hunger doesn't care about taste or safety. Then the landlord came. The knock was sharp, authoritative, adult. I froze, heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it through the door. I didn't answer. I stood perfectly still as he slid an eviction notice underneath and walked away. I sank to the floor and stared at the paper until the words blurred. I thought about telling him the truth, about explaining, but fear won. My mother had always warned me about foster care, about being taken away, about never seeing her again. So I hid. I stayed quiet. I made myself invisible. Neighbors noticed. They always do. I lied when they asked where my mom was. I smiled. I said she was working late. I listened through thin walls as adults debated my life like it was neighborhood gossip. The shame burned hotter than the hunger. I learned how to survive in ways no child should ever have to. I collected cans for spare change. I learned which dumpsters behind grocery stores had food that was not completely spoiled. I hated the smell. I hated the fear of being seen. I hated myself for doing it, but I did it anyway. I still went to school. I still did my homework. I told myself that if I could just hold on until she came back, everything would make sense. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I started writing everything down. Dates, hunger, fear, lies, notices. I didn't know why. Only that something inside me knew this mattered, that one day I would need proof. Not for anyone else, for myself. The only real help I got came quietly. A teacher who noticed I was always hungry, extra snacks slipped into my bag, staying late after school so I didn't have to rush home. She didn't interrogate me, she didn't force confessions, she just showed up. When my mother finally called weeks later, laughing, saying they might stay longer, something inside me broke completely. When she came back, sunburned and smiling, she expected everything to be the same. It wasn't. She minimized it, dismissed it, said I'd survived, so it couldn't have been that bad. But this time, I didn't shrink back. I handed her my words, my proof, my truth. She never apologized. She never became the mother I needed, but she never left me alone like that again, not out of love, but out of fear. And that was enough until I could leave. I left as soon as I was old enough. I built a life without asking for permission. I learned that strength isn't something you're born with, it's something you're forced to build when no one protects you. I was 11 years old with $2 and no one to save me. I survived anyway.